ended up with part 2 of the last couple chapters, chapters 14 and 15. And again, the stuff is changing so fast that any textbook that tries to deal with just the mass media or anything digital or online becomes dated very quickly. So, but just a couple distinctions here. Communication technologies are means of recording, transferring, sharing, and working with information. Communication technologies include long-established devices such as the telephone and newer technologies such as smartphones and iPads. Digital media is simply electronic modes of communication that store and manage data in digital form rather than analog form. When you communicate face-to-face, you don't have digital electronic systems mediating between you and the other persons or person. So basically, this is just saying any kind of mediated form of communication, digital communication now, whether it's by our phones or computer, etc., video conferencing, the data is stored in computers and then transmitted to the other person or persons. You guys have been immersed in the internet from birth, so you really don't know any other way. But really, the public part of the internet, known as the World Wide Web, didn't come about until 1995. And the internet itself goes back quite a bit further. And so it's worthwhile to talk about the origin story of the internet. It happened during the Cold War, and it was a military project, a U.S. military project called ARPANET. And the Cold War was a situation between the U.S. and the USSR where the danger of nuclear war was constant and imminent, and it was a very nerve-wracking time, and there's still the danger of that today, but it seemed to be at its height in the 50s and 60s. And so the ARPANET project was a project of the U.S. military to build a communication system that could not be knocked out in the event of a nuclear war, in that it's a decentralized communication system. There's no like center of it. It's spread around. There are different what's called nodes, and one node could be knocked out, another would pick things up, etc., etc. Or many nodes could be knocked out, but the other nodes, other parts of the system would just pick up the communication. So you can just think of, in the event of something as horrifying as that, just think of how important and valuable communication would be. And so that's where it started. And it's very different, obviously, today, much more advanced. After the Cold War kind of settled down, universities and colleges kind of picked up the network, and academics and researchers, and particularly a lot of hippies out in California. No offense to our California students. We owe a lot to you when it comes to technology, for sure, but they kind of picked it up and started developing it, and eventually it turned into the World Wide Web and what we have today. This is something that's going to be really difficult to cover in a short amount of time. Clearly, this technology, whether you look at it on a small scale on a cell phone or the internet itself, it's affecting our thinking. It's becoming an extension of our brains and our minds, really. And one of the examples that I had there with multitasking, we would have talked about that in class. You know, in a lot of ways, the technology is kind of outpacing, our evolution. So there's really, multitasking is kind of a myth because our brains have to focus on one thing, but this technology allows us to do 1,000 things at once. So there's no question though that it's changing how we're evolving and how we think. Um, there's a lot of uses and abuses with technology, and I threw up a bunch of uh, services and online spaces here, and social media. Um, it helps some people form their identity. Many people form their identity, and that's what's called. Talked a little bit about this at the beginning of class. Social construction gives you more freedom to kind of create your identity how you want to. Simply connects us. This, I'll be honest with you, I really seems like a lot of younger folks gave up on Facebook. I've had an account probably since 2006, but really haven't used it much in the last 5, 6 years, 6, 7 years. But recently, with the stay-at-home stuff, not being able to hang out with friends and family, I've been using it more. There's no question it connects us. It's not, some of you have shared in the discussions, it's better being together. There's no question, whether it's for class or socially, being present with one another is the best way. But I think it's a lifeline for a lot of people right now. And then, of course, there's downsides to this. There's a lot of online bullying, and just like anything else, too much of it can get unhealthy, and it can lead to certain kinds of addictions. Then we have, how about this? This slide, again, was put together well before all this happened, and online. So it's up to you to decide whether you think online learning can work or not. Because pretty much every university and college in the country has been forced to go online. I would just say, realize that nobody planned for it. So you're kind of seeing a poor representation of how online learning can go. And many of you just wouldn't choose to learn online to begin with. So a lot of the research into online learning involves students who've self-selected to do that, because it's just not for everybody. So, and this is up to you to decide whether what you got was of value or not. But really, it has allowed us to continue on, so we should all be thankful for that. And we're going to learn from this. It's a big part of the professional world. Technology of all kinds. Again, when I've talked about the importance of communication, we're not just talking about face-to-face communication and handshakes and eye contact and nonverbals. You have to be adept at using these different services and tools. And then it can also be used to organize people together. And you can see there's a group here, like a protest group or some kind of movement, and it allows for that as well. Unfortunately, technology can kind of contribute to and accelerate inequalities too. One of the big ones when it comes to, and this is generally related to learning, not specifically online learning, but just the development of knowledge, that there's what's called the digital divide, which leads to what's called a knowledge gap. Not everybody has the same technology or access to the same technology. There's just a big spread among what some the haves and the have-nots. And it's relevant to our current situation. Albion's like most other institutions. Not every student or professor has the same skills or the same software and hardware and knowledge. And, this is something that our leaders need to address, because it's just something that's, while technology can bring us so much and help us so much, it can also magnify some of the problems, and inequality is one of them. I think that the final prescription here, this is the kind of final prescription for the class when it comes to digital media and the online world, is just, I put a little picture here of some guy. I wonder how far he had to climb up that to get up to that platform. Looks a little dangerous. Beautiful view though. I think he's just kind of, he or she is just kind of meditating and chilling. But really the most important thing, at least in my mind, is that you need to know how to use all these things. It's going to help you. We can't stick our heads in the sand and ignore all this. That wouldn't be a good idea, but we should really manage it. Just like everything else, moderation is the key. It can be overused, and so just keep it to a balance. And with that, that's going to conclude this presentation. I'll see you guys back in the virtual classroom in the course web.